Hi, once again, the voice of Heidie Calero, another economic capsule on the Puerto Rico economy. Over the past 4 capsules, we have been covering almost 7 decades of economic growth and depression in Puerto Rico. What lessons have we learned? Well, let's look at the graph to see the whodunit tale in terms of economic growth for this island. Well, this transformation, the 53s to the 73s, GNP growth of almost 6% growth on an annual basis, investment, the heart of any economy, 13% growth annually, total jobs over these 2 decades, 57,000 jobs were added to Puerto Rico's employment. The participation rate was about 48%. Public debt, very limited, $3 billion, but used in infrastructure, and net transfer payments almost $200 million. What did we learn? Fiscal discipline was present, public debt was not abused, public corporations were established so that they could be self-sufficient, and Puerto Rico's industrialization was flourishing with labor-intensive industrialization. Only one thing Puerto Rico had to lose: very clear economic policies, poverty. We had a great economic administration that continued over almost 3 decades of administration, 3 administrations, continuation of economic policies which rendered fruits in economic growth. Let's look at the next stage of growth in Puerto Rico that we talked about, growth and recessions. The first 2 recessions in modern Puerto Rico, in 75 and then 81, 82, 83, these were the product of the oil shocks. What did Puerto Rico learn? That we had to implement austere measures, bad medicine, but at the same time, even though we had the medicine that we had to swallow in terms of austerity, we also had to have an instrument of economic growth, and we achieved that with the assistance of Section 936, with the U.S. Congress favoring Puerto Rico and trying to stimulate what was the experiment of making Puerto Rico a democracy with growth, as opposed to Cuba, the communist Cuba that's in the past 2 decades. Well, we had then 2.1% average growth, investment slightly reduced, 6%, but investment in infrastructure. This was very important during this time. Total jobs, an increase of 262,000 jobs, participation rate still below 50%, and public debt increasing but used by public corporations very wisely, and net transfer payments still not very huge, $3.4 billion, mostly the food stamp program. Lessons to be learned: again, investment was at the heart of this. Even though there was change in administrations, economic policies with this assistance of Section 936 enabled Puerto Rico to get into a new stage. Public debt was used, but it was fiscally disciplined, 50% of GNP. Important lessons to be learned. Well, let's look at the third stage, the end of Section 936 in terms of this whodunit tale of growth in Puerto Rico. In 1996, then Governor Rosselló went to Congress together with resident Commissioner Romero Barceló and said, we don't need Section 936. And Congress said, you're going to hurt. I'll give you 10 years. What lesson did we learn? We did not use strategic planning for this phase-out period. And the country, we thought, well, changes in administrations, business as usual. Well, guess what? Business was not as usual. Investment, notice here, 1.1% growth with scarcely 3% growth, scarcely 6,000 new jobs, and still the challenge in participation rate, but the public debt this time increasing enormously. Used not only for infrastructure, but mostly for operational government deficits. Lesson to be learned. And on top of that, net transfer payments growing and not being used very productively in terms of growth, which is the heart of any economy. Let's look at the last stage in this whodunit tale of GNP growth. And this is the current one. We have been having this depression since 2007, a continuation of that. GNP growth in negative real terms, negative 1.2%, even with the forecast of the Promesa Fiscal Board, which was put in place in 2016 by President Obama when Puerto Rico's governor announced at the end of 2015 that Puerto Rico could not pay its public debt. Lesson to be learned in 2016 when this board was implemented in June of 2016, Puerto Rico went into its debt default. The good thing about the fiscal board was that it enabled Puerto Rico to go into Title III bankruptcy, to have some respite and some relief of all these creditors. But one thing that should never have been done was to renege on the payment of the public debt service of the general obligation bonds. That was our presentation card, and Puerto Rico said, we are not paying anything. We don't have enough money to pay for the public debt. We have not been paying the public debt since 2016 through 2019 for almost 4 years. Now we have to start paying COFINA. Look at investment, negative 2%, and we wonder why we have negative growth. Look at total jobs, a loss of 23,000 jobs because of the loss of 936 as well, a low participation rate, a public debt that has harnessed all these fiscal revenues, and now on top of this, $17 billion in transfer payments and disasters of Hurricane Maria, which forges Puerto Rico's economic future, and now with the tremors of fiscal 2020, the earthquakes which started at the end of December of 2019 and which have continued from January the 7th even to this day. Lessons to be learned. Is Puerto Rico ready for these disasters? Have we learned anything from Hurricane Maria? Have we learned anything that austerity measures alone will not suffice to pull Puerto Rico out of this depression? We need economic growth. We need the instruments. We need opportunity zones. But above all, we need a vision to focus on these economic policies and have an action plan and implement it. We need to put these lessons into effect if we are going to rebuild Puerto Rico. Thank you.